All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the weekly UK Sangha. Um, this is an open call, open to anyone. Anyone can join. We get together every week, and I teach the Dhamma here, and anyone is welcome to come teach the Dhamma as well, or ask questions, or just tag along for the ride. So today I picked out some suttas to read, or one sutta in particular. Imin 22, the simile of the snake. And I'm not going to read the first part. I'm just going to jump to the actual similes that are towards the end of it. The first part is just some guy that has a pernicious view, and his pernicious view is that obstructions are not obstructive. And they pretty much say, like, no, you're wrong. Like, obstructions are obstructive. And so it's kind of, you get the point of it. That's pretty much all it is. And then it continues on with the simile of the snake. Here, bhikkhus, some misguided men learn the Dhamma, discourses, stanzas, expositions, verses, exclamations, sayings, birth stories, marvels, and answers to questions. But having learned the Dhamma, they do not examine the meaning of the teachings with wisdom. Not examining the meaning of those teachings with wisdom, they do not gain a reflective acceptance of them. Instead, they learn the Dhamma only for the sake of criticizing others and for winning in debates. And they do not experience the good for the sake of which they learn the Dhamma. Those teachings, being wrongly grasped by them, conduce to their harm and suffering for a long time. All right, so that's kind of interesting. So like people can use the Dhamma for the sake of winning arguments. I can't say that I haven't done this before, but the point is to not. Hey, welcome, Isaiah. It's
Hello.
good to see you, man.
Good to see you too.
How you doing?
Going good. Just roasting some coffee right now. That's about
Okay,
it.
good, good. Yeah, no, we're just reading a sutta about the simile of a snake, and
Okay.
the first paragraph you missed is some people learn the Dhamma without actually like getting the meaning of it, but they just know it like intellectually to win arguments. Um,
Uh,
yeah, and this is in the sutta, canonical sutta, and like the funny thing is like there's so many things in the actual suttas that the Buddha predicted that is going to happen, and then to this day, people are still doing it because
yeah.
it's just like a fundamental thing that humans are going to do. Like they're going to posture, try to put themselves above other people. So, oh, I'm important. I'm this big. I mean, there's some monks that are like, oh, I'm this big important monk, and that's my identity, and like you have no right to, how dare you talk about the Dhamma, or how dare you teach the Dhamma, right? uh
Yeah.
I'm a academic, right? So they have like kind of like this whole like big ego about it, instead of just getting like the fruit of the Dhamma by grasping it correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's funny. Yeah. It sounds familiar on the nose on that one. He is.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm not gonna say that I haven't used it to win arguments, but it depends. Like it depends whether you get the meaning of it.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
but the point is, I think there's another sutta that says if it's not stated in the sutta or and the Vinaya, it's not
Mhm.
the Dhamma. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of Dharma or Dhamma that's taught that's not in the actual canonical suttas. It's like in the
Mhm.
later literature, and they teach it as if it was the teaching of the Buddha. And the Buddha actually predicted this would happen, and he said if that's not in the sutta or the Vinaya, it's not the Dhamma. I didn't say
Yeah.
that shit. Like like the Buddha quote, I did not say that shit. bruh.
Yeah, I did not say that, bro. That's funny.
Yeah.
And
Anyway,
then, but in the canon too, he does also argue with other people from different sects, but it's almost always to make sure that they get the right view, so that they themselves get the fruit of the
yeah,
teaching. So,
yeah. Welcome, Pietro. Good to have you. Good to see you. Yeah. So the Buddha mainly corrects people um, that are misrepresenting the Buddha's teaching. So most of the time, with the pernicious view and the correcting, um, it's that they've misrepresented the Dhamma as taught by the Buddha. And then also other wanderers and other sects that think that they understand the Dhamma in the way that the Buddha has comprehended, and those taught by the Buddha and those that realize the same enlightenment actually don't understand it in that way. Like they don't understand the dependent origination. They haven't seen the impermanent independent nature of feelings, thoughts, perception, and all sensory phenomena. But they say, "Oh yeah, we get that. We get that too." No, they don't. But anyways, I'm gonna I'm gonna continue with the sutta, the simile of a snake. Suppose a man needing a snake, seeking a snake, wandering in search of a snake, saw a large snake and grasped its coils or its tail. It would turn back on him and bite his hand, or his arm, or one of his limbs. And because of that, he would come to death or deadly suffering. Why is that? Because of his wrong grasp of the snake. So too, here some misguided men learn the Dhamma, those teachings, being wrongly grasped by them, conduce to their harm and suffering for a long time. Right? So you can, if you grasp the Dhamma wrongly, if you use it for anything other than its intended purpose, it will bite you. So, what is the Dhamma's intended purpose? Can anyone answer that? DJ?
Dukkha dukkha nirodha.
That's right. Right. So that's what this all is about. This is this whole thing. If the Dhamma is anything other than about um, understanding dissatisfaction and bringing an end to dissatisfaction, kind of missing the whole point of it. So that's would be grasping it in the metaphorical snake in the wrong place, and you get bit by it. Here some bhikkhus, some clansmen, learn the Dhamma, discourses, answers to questions, and having learned the Dhamma, they examine the meaning of those teachings with wisdom. Examining the meaning of those teachings with wisdom, they gain a reflective acceptance of them. They do not learn the Dhamma for the sake of criticizing others or for winning debates, and they experience the good for the sake of which they learn the Dhamma. Those teachings, being rightly grasped by them, conduce to their welfare and happiness for a long time. Right? So the Dhamma is universal to anyone who reads it and understands it. So anyone can read the original teachings of the Buddha, uh, ponder the teachings with wisdom, reflect on the teachings with wisdom, see how it applies in your real life experience, and then get the fruit of it. So it's open to anyone. It's on the internet completely for free. Anyone can Google it. um, Suppose a man needing a snake, seeking a snake, wandering in search of a snake, saw a large snake and caught it rightly with a cleft stick, and having done so, grasped it rightly by the neck. And then, although the snake might wrap its coils around his hand, or his arm, or his limbs, still he would not come to death or deadly suffering because of that. Right? So the way that he grabbed the snake is by the neck, pressing its head like this. can't buy you that way. Why is that? Because of his right grasp of the snake. So too, here some clansmen learn the Dhamma. Those teachings, being rightly grasped by them, conduce to their welfare and happiness for a long time. Therefore, bhikkhus, when you understand the meaning of my statements, remember it accordingly. And when you do not understand the meaning of my statements, then ask either me about it or those bhikkhus who are wise, right? So if you understand the meanings of the statements of the Buddha, then great. That's the experiential fruit, the experiential happiness that you'll gain from that. If you don't understand it, you can ask. There are still people who are wise who teach the Dhamma here and now today, to this day. You can ask them. Okay, so that's the simile of the snake. The next, before I move on, does anyone have any questions about the simile of the snake? Okay, yeah, it's fairly straightforward. The next simile is the simile of the raft. Okay. Bhikkhus, I shall show you how the Dhamma is similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping. Listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, Venerable Sir, the bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, suppose a man in the course of a journey saw a great expanse of water, whose near shore was dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore was safe and free from fear. But there was no ferry boat or bridge going to the far shore. Then he thought, there is a great expanse of water, whose near shore is dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore is safe and free from fear. But there is no ferry boat or bridge going to the far shore. Suppose I collect grass, twigs, branches, and leaves, and bind them together into a raft, and supported by the raft and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. And then the man collected grass, twigs, branches, and leaves, and bound them together into a raft, and supported by the raft, and making an effort with his hands and feet, he got safely across to the far shore. Then when he had got across and had arrived at the far shore, he might think thus, this raft has been very helpful to me, since supported by it, and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I were to hoist it on my head or load it on my shoulder, and then go wherever I want. Now, bhikkhus, what do you think? By doing so, would that man be doing what should be done with that raft? No, Venerable Sir. By doing what would that man be doing what should be done with that raft? That's kind of a tongue twister. That's a funny translation. By doing what would that man be doing what should be done with that raft? Here, bhikkhus, when that man got across, I don't know if you guys ever seen those memes where it's like intentionally like the wrong words on the it's like there where whom should be, and you're like trying to read trying to read it. Here, bhikkhus, when that man got across and had arrived at the far shore, he might think thus, this raft has been very helpful to me, since supported by it and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I were to haul it onto the dry land, or set it adrift into the water, and then go wherever I want. Now, bhikkhus, it is by doing so that that man would be doing what should be done with the raft. So I have shown you how the Dhamma is similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping. Bhikkhus, when you know the Dhamma to be similar to a raft, you should abandon even good states. How much more so bad states? Okay. So that's the last line is pretty important here. So I'm going to read it again. Bhikkhus, when you know the Dhamma to be similar to a raft, you should abandon even good states. How much more so bad states? Okay.
So in this simile, is it essentially like once you get free from the hindrance, even if it's momentarily, then that's enough, and that's all you do. You don't wait to do something more. You don't wait to like rouse up any, I guess, even wholesome states. Like just freedom from the hindrances is enough, even if it's in that moment, and you don't have to do anything else aside from that. Is that kind of like what it's pointing to?
So when you are free from the hindrances and you enter into first jhana, okay, certain processes of your mind that were creating suffering before have come to an end, right? And then now you experience the pleasure born dependent upon those processes of mind or hindrances coming to an end. Now, normally what you guys will do is, ooh, yes, give me that pleasure. I like this, right? You're like, you got some pleasure, good states, because you understand one of the Four Noble Truths, suffering, and then its origin, so a hindrance, and then you experience the third noble truth, it's passing away, and then you grasp onto the pleasure born out of this experience, so it's a good state, it's a pleasurable abiding, and you latch onto it and you want it to stay, and because you want it to stay and because you latch onto it, it bites you, because the jhana, or the pleasurable state, or the sukha and the piti, is inherently impermanent and inherently unsatisfactory either. So the thing to do when you get into jhana is keep going with the meditation, or keep going with the right view, keep going with the non-grasping, right? It's the non-grasping that got you out of the bad state to begin with, right? So it's because you did not cling to bad states that the aversion to those bad states came to an end. And when a good state arises, you don't cling to that either. Because if you cling to that, it's going to just trap you in the same clinging that was creating your dukkha to begin with. So you keep going with an indifference to the good or bad states, and all that we're concerned about is how does the process of mind work, and how does suffering come about, how does it go away, and what is the way leading it to it going away. So when you get into the jhana, you see experientially how it went away and the way leading to it. So what is the way leading to suffering going away? What's the most important part of the Eightfold Noble Path? Does anyone know?
Keeping it the three: right view, right investigation, and right effort. And they run
That's right. But right view is the pinnacle. So there's another sutta that states right view is the pinnacle. So right view here would be just simply view the state, the good state, as what it is, and not grasp to it. So this is sukha. This is piti. This is ataka vichara. This is the applied and sustained wholesome thought. And you're just viewing these things happening without grasping to them or saying, oh, this is mine, or this is my jhana, or look how good a meditator I am. I got into jhana and this is mine. And then when it goes away, it's gonna bite you. And then you suffer when you're not in the jhana anymore. If you're just doing right view, when the jhana comes to an end and the unwholesome thought comes back, or hindrance comes back, or dukkha, any type of restlessness or fear comes back, you're going to be just looking at that also with indifference. So you're going to be equanimous to either good or bad states. And this practice leads to the cultivation of wisdom. So the wisdom eye will awaken if you don't get too mesmerized or enchanted by the jhanas. The whole point of the jhanas is to understand dependent origination more thoroughly. So to understand suffering, the arisal of suffering, the passing away, and the way leading to it passing away, experientially with what's going on in all of your moment-to-moment experiences. So the perception of the mind of raw data, the feelings that arise because of it, all of the sights, sounds, taste, smells, and touch that you experience. The point is to understand how these things are going on. That's would be the wisdom. And then if you keep going to that, you'll see that there's an escape beyond the first jhana. So you keep viewing past it. You keep viewing the meditation. You don't get caught up in the first jhana. You are. It is because you're satisfied with the way things are that you don't grasp to the first jhana. So when you say the hindrance is gone and this is enough, yes, this is enough, but this is enough before the hindrance is gone too, and this is enough past the first jhana and the second jhana and all the way to fruition, which is the fruition of this is enough. So seeing that the first jhana is just an impermanent, impersonal thing, you can go past it, see that there's an escape beyond this, and then if you keep viewing, if you keep right viewing the nature of your experience, eventually it will take you all the way to the experience of nibbana. And then once you experience nibbana, then you see there's nothing, there's no further state beyond this. There's nothing beyond this, and you don't. And then the nibbana, even nibbana is like a raft. You don't cling to nibbana either. That would be a wrong grasping of the Dhamma. But good question, Isaiah. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. So it's basically just the right view is just seeing that it's cause and effect, that I guess first jhana or freedom from the hindrances is not that special anyways. And just seeing, oh, I do this and I get here.
Well, what's special about the freedom of the hindrances and the attainment of first jhana is the actual direct experience of how does suffering come to an end. That's what's important. So remember, always bring it back to the Four Noble Truths. That's the foundation. That's the bedrock of the Dhamma. So the point is not to. Yes, the point is to enjoy the jhana, enjoy it, be satisfied, soak it in. But the jhana is a vehicle for wisdom, for understanding how does suffering come about? How does my mind create suffering? And how does my mind stop creating suffering? And you see that when you are in jhana is because you're not thinking about shit that's making you feel bad. It's you lighten up. You don't think about stuff that isn't here right now. You don't think about anything that's mentally proliferating, and the thoughts that are thinking about things that aren't here and mentally proliferating, you don't take that to be me. So you just let them happen without getting engaged with them, without feeding them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. So just like keep bringing it back to the Four Noble Truths, and
Yeah.
that's good enough. And then you say,
yeah, just you keep viewing.
keep viewing.
Don't
All right.
stop looking. Don't say, okay, now I'm gonna stop looking, and then when you wind up back in dukkha, you don't know how you got back in dukkha. You got back in dukkha because you stopped looking at what's going on, right?
Yeah.
That's ignorance.
Mhm.
Yeah, become fascinated by it, become curious, the enthusiasm and the joy of discovering how does this work is the secret to the end of suffering. It's, I mean, the looking and the investigation further fuels the joy for it, right? The joy of discovery. Like, wow, I'm finding out stuff. Even when
Yeah.
you even when you find out your own dukkha and you look at your own dukkha, you get happy because of it. Because now I'm spotting my own dukkha.
Yeah.
Before you try run from it, but the Sotapan finds joy in looking at their own dukkha because they're turning up that rock and seeing what's under it. So, okay, I'm going to continue with the sutta, but very good questions, Isaiah. Thanks for asking. Okay, so the next one is standpoints for views. Bhikkhus, there are 6 standpoints for views. What are the 6? Here, bhikkhus, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form thus: this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards feeling thus: this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards perception thus: this is mine, this I am, this is myself. Does it, so the word perception here, I feel like can be misunderstood. So is there anyone who wants to explain what the Buddha means by perception? Okay, so perception,
I got it.
okay, go, DJ.
Oh wait, no, I'd rather hear like an explanation. Yeah.
All right, DJ.
Oh no, from what I like understand, like perception is sort of like on one hand it is sort of like the labeling of things like, okay, this is a head, this is a hand, this is a phone. But one of the ways that I found more thoroughly beyond like language to point to it in a way is like, well, it's okay, like hand from non-hand in like the foreground from the background in a way might be another way to look at perception as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so perception is the process of mind that interprets reality to make sense of it. And this process of mind that interprets reality usually interprets things in through the lens of self and other, subject and object, right? So this is me and that's not me. Making boundaries around things, perceiving things. So I have the raw data of my vision, right? And then I categorize and interpret what I'm actually seeing, right? But this process of perception, it's fine that it's not a problem that's happening. We need perception to like be a functioning organism, like a functioning human. But this process of perception is happening on its own. So you might think that you are the one who's labeling things, or you are the one who's interpreting your experiences, but really this process is arising impersonally, like the weather or like the clouds. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, you know, you look at a table, there's the vision of the table, and then there's something that happens that goes, this is a table. Even if you don't think that discursive thought, this is a table, you look at a table and know it's a table. So that's perception. Okay, so he regards perception thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards formations thus. And formations is pretty much just like anything that's a thing that's formed out of other things. So like a sankhara. So pretty much all of it is formations. Like all of the things that you experience are formations. This is mine, this I am, this is myself. He regards what is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, encountered, sought, mentally pondered upon. Thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. And this standpoint for views, namely, this is self, this is the world. Oh, okay, this is self, this the world. After death, I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change. I shall endure as long as eternity. This too he regards thus. This is mine, this I am, this is myself. Bhikkhus, a well-taught noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. He regards feeling thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Okay, so that's very important for feeling. So you guys you feel whatever it is, you feel like a painful emotion, you feel a painful feeling, feel a painful sensation, anxiety, worry, even dread. Um, the the problem is not the feeling. The problem is thinking that this is me, right? That's when the feeling becomes unbearable. That's when, because we ignorantly take ownership of it, and so now we're burdened by it. So we have a painful feeling and we don't see it as me. This is not mine. This is not me. I don't own this feeling. Then we can allow the feeling to pass through without taking ownership of it and carrying it around longer than we need to carry it around. Right? So good or bad feelings, right? Pleasant or painful feelings. They're both not self. He regards feeling thus, this is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. He regards perception thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. He regards formations thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. He regards what is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, encountered, sought, mentally pondered upon. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. And this standpoint for views, namely, this is self, this the world, after death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, I shall endure as long as eternity. This too he regards thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Since he regards them thus, he is not agitated about what is non-existent. So he is not agitated about what is non-existent. What isn't there doesn't agitate him. So what's not here isn't really my problem. And what is here even isn't my problem either, because it's not me. Right? So something not being self is essentially the same as saying that's not my problem. Right? So what I'm thinking about is not my problem. What I'm experiencing is not my problem. What I'm feeling is not my problem because it's not me, and it doesn't belong to me either. Right? Agitation. When this was said, a certain bhikkhu asked the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, can there be agitation about what is non-existent externally? There can be, bhikkhu. The Blessed One said, Here, bhikkhu, someone thinks thus. Alas, I had it. Alas, I have it no longer. Alas, may I have it? Alas, I do not get it. Then he sorrows, grieves, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes distraught. That is how there is agitation about what is non-existent externally. Does that does that sound familiar to you guys? Have you? So this is fundamental about the human condition. This is the same reason why people suffer today, is what the Buddha was talking about way then. Oh, I had it. Now I don't have it anymore. I might have it, but I didn't, but I don't get it. Whatever it is, right? Could be your ex-girlfriend. That's a common one. Oh, I had it, but I have it no longer. So what do you do when there's agitation about what is non-existent? You sorrow, grieve, lament, and weep, and become distraught. Right. So that's how the agitation works with those kinds of thoughts. Is there any question about that before I go on? No? Okay. Venerable Sir, can there be no agitation about what is non-existent externally? There can be, bhikkhu. The Blessed One said, Here, bhikkhu, someone does not think thus. Alas, I had it. Alas, I have it no longer. Alas, may I have it. Alas, I do not get it. Then he does not sorrow, grieve, and lament. He does not weep, beating his breast and become distraught. That is how there is no agitation about what is non-existent externally. All right, so you get rid of these thoughts. That's the same as throwing out unwholesome thoughts. And or even so, let's say you are having those thoughts. I had it and it's gone, or I want it and I don't get it. So let's say those thoughts are already happening, then don't view those thoughts as me. Those aren't my thoughts, right? Those thoughts are just arising because of past conditionings. So past sankharas, habits that were formed in the past that are continuing into the future. And to break out of the cycle, you have to realize that these thoughts are just happening because of the causes and conditions, and they're not actually you. So that's how you can make a change and then actually stop thinking those kinds of thoughts. Venerable Sir, can there be agitation about what is non-existent internally? There can be, bhikkhu. The Blessed One said, Here, bhikkhu, someone has the view, this is self, this is the world. After death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change. I shall endure as long as eternity. He hears the Tathagata or a disciple of the Tathagata teaching the Dhamma for the elimination of all standpoints, decisions, obsessions, adherences, and underlying tendencies, for the stilling of all formations, for the relinquishing of all attachments, for the destruction of craving, for dispassion, for cessation, for nibbana. He thinks thus, so I shall be annihilated, so I shall perish, so I shall be no more. Then he sorrows, grieves, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes distraught. This is how there is agitation about what is non-existent internally. Venerable Sir, can there be no agitation about what is non-existent internally? There can be, bhikkhu. The Blessed One said, Here, bhikkhus, Someone does not have the view, this is self. I shall endure as long as eternity. He hears the Tathagata, or disciple of the Tathagata, teaching the Dhamma for the elimination of all standpoints, decisions, obsessions, adherences, for the relinquishment of all attachments, for the destruction of craving, for dispassion, for cessation, for nibbana. He does not think thus. So I shall be annihilated, so I shall perish, so I shall be no more. Then he does not sorrow, grieve, and lament. He does not weep, beating his breast, and become distraught. That is how there is no agitation about what is non-existent internally. All right. So that's the end of that little section. I'm gonna, like, it makes sense to me. I'm gonna keep going unless there's a question about it. Okay. All right, the next one is impermanence and not self. Bhikkhus, you may well acquire that possession that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and that might endure as long as eternity. But do you see any such possession, bhikkhus? No, venerable sir. Good bhikkhus. I too do not see any possession that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, and that might endure as long as eternity. Right? So the Buddha is essentially saying, like, yeah, show me something that's permanent. Can you find it? Like, can you guys think of anything or find anything that's actually permanent that does not change? I can't. All right, so that's essentially what the Buddha is saying. Uh, Bhikkhus, you may well cling to that doctrine of self that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who clings to it. But do you see any such doctrine of self, bhikkhus? No, venerable sir. Good bhikkhus, I too do not see any doctrine of self that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who clings to it. Right. So a lot of people in non-duality who cling to the doctrine of the eternal self, that doesn't actually lead to this destruction of craving or nibbana. So like that actual clinging to self or being eternal self actually causes them agitation and suffering. However much they try to deny it, right? For one who has experienced nibbana, or the destruction of craving, and refers to it as the self, really what they're just referring to is seeing things as they actually are, or the Dhammakaya, the full body of things. So essentially what they're calling the self is just what's left when there's no craving. So a mind without craving is the self. But that's not a good teaching, because that teaching does not lead to a mind without craving. If you if you look at a lot of the people within those traditions who started teaching that, like someone like Ramana Maharshi or something like that, usually they had like a spontaneous awakening. They just woke up, and then now they're trying to explain it to other people. And how do they explain it? Well, they explain it with what they grew up around in India and like the Hindu traditions. So they say, oh, it's the self, but really that it's not. So the Buddha's awakening is unsurpassed, and there may be lower levels of awakening, and there may be people who even attain to boundless consciousness, and they take it wrongly to be self, who also are causing agitation for themselves, even though they have attained a very refined state of consciousness, and may be able to do it again. It's still not the same as the unsurpassed awakening of the Buddha. So there's like a more sublime realization beyond it. Bhikkhus, you may well cling to that doctrine of self that would not arouse. Okay, Bhikkhus, you may well take as a support that view that would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who takes it as a support. But do you see any such support of views, Bhikkhus? No, Venerable Sir. Good, Bhikkhus. I do not see any such support of views. That would not arouse sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in one who takes it as support. Bhikkhus, there being a self, would there be what belongs to myself? Yes, Venerable Sir. Or there being what belongs to a self, would there be myself? Yes, Venerable Sir. Right, so these two things are codependent arising. So with the self, there comes that which belongs to a self, right? So this is, with a self comes, this is my body. So my body belongs to myself. And with what belongs to myself creates the self. So if this is my body, that creates the self. So these two things are codependent arising. Bhikkhus, since a self and what belongs to a self are not apprehended as true and established, then this standpoint for views, namely, this is self, this is the world, after death I shall be permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, I shall endure as long as eternity, would it not be utterly and completely foolish teaching? What else could it be, Venerable Sir? It would be an utterly and completely foolish teaching. Bhikkhus, what do you think? Is material form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. All right, so there you have it. The three characteristics of reality right there. And it's very important how he segues these three characteristics, right? So I'm going to read that paragraph again because it's pretty important. Bhikkhus, what do you think? Is material form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Right, so is experience impermanent or permanent? It's impermanent. And is something that's impermanent suffering or happiness? It's suffering, because something that comes and goes inherently is not a source of lasting satisfaction. So it will create suffering. Even a jhana, right? Even first jhana. And guys, if you're raising your hand or anything, I'm switching tabs. So just if you want to ask a question, just interrupt me during it. Bhikkhus, what do you think? Is feeling, is perception, our formation, is consciousness permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change? Fit to be regarded thus: this is mine, this I am, this is myself. No, Venerable Sir. Right, so that's how anicca links to dukkha, links to anatta. So what is changing can't be you, right? Does that make sense? Like, that's pretty straightforward. Like, if it comes and goes, it's not you, because you would be gone if it was you, right? You'd be gone with it. All right, so pretty straightforward. Therefore, bhikkhus, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all material forms should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Any kind of feeling whatsoever, any kind of perception whatsoever, any kind of formations whatsoever, any kind of consciousness whatsoever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. All consciousness should be seen as it actually is, with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Seeing thus, bhikkhus, a well-taught noble disciple becomes disenchanted with material form, disenchanted with feeling, disenchanted with perception, disenchanted with formations, disenchanted with consciousness. Being disenchanted, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more coming into any state of being. Right. So nibbana is pretty much like the total fruition, realization of no self. You because you stop clinging to what doesn't belong to you. With disenchantment comes dispassion, and with dispassion comes the end of craving. So you stop crave for anything, and then you experience nibbana, and then that is the total unsurpassed enlightenment or awakening, the end of suffering whatsoever. Let's see, how much time are we at?
Yeah, it's like we really cling like to the, it's just the same thing. Like we have I think since we are kid, like we have a little toy. It's like the beautiful thing ever, and then we see a spot of something new, and the one we have now it's like shit, and so we want the new one. And so as soon as you hear something like more that in your mind desire or something, you go, okay, I go for that. I go for that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the thought. Alas, may I have it? And then so you go for that, and when you don't get it, I didn't get it, and then so that will create sorrow, lamentation, and despair, right? So so you can see, so those thoughts aren't a problem, but when you see those thoughts, understand them, see what, look, my mind's doing it again. My mind's creating dukkha, right? So it's interesting, right? We can see, so like, it's not that like all of a sudden you're gonna stop having any thoughts about anything or whatever, but you can see the cause and effect of these thoughts. You can see, this thought leads to the end of dukkha, or this thought creates dukkha. So there's pretty much just two kinds of thoughts. There's dukkha thoughts and there's dukkha nirodha thoughts. So the more you pay attention, the more you can guide the mind in the dukkha nirodha direction, and so apply and sustain one wholesome thought after another. This back the fundamentals, right? And then the really you get into refined, collected singleness of mind. You can really see formations, subtle and gross, consciousness, perception, Vedana. You can see in the not self, and that's how you attain to Nibbana.
I liked it when you said that before that this process creates wisdom, because it's not like by trying to grasp at wisdom that you can actually get wisdom, but it's by doing this process that you described here.
Yeah, So even wisdom, like everything else, is dependently originated. So this is the process by which wisdom arises. So ignorance and wisdom are both paticca samuppada. So with ignorance comes the arisal of all the things that cause suffering and views of self. So views that this is me. It's not that the self ever was there, ever is there, ever will be there. It's the view that this is a self arises, right? So people think that the self arises and then practicing the Dhamma, the self goes away. No, the self was never there to begin with. It's just the view that this is me, right? It's always just been, shit has been happening and there's no self there, right? But we don't know that because we didn't pay attention, investigate reality. So wisdom, as Pietro is talking about, and wisdom comes about. How does it come about? Right view, right? It starts with right view. So taking a look at what's going on. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. Let's see. Yeah, we're almost to the end. Yeah, we could finish this. Okay, so the next one is the Arhat. Arhat. Bhikkhus. This bhikkhu is called one whose shaft. All right, sorry. One whose shaft has been lifted. All right, forgive me. Forgive my chuckles. Okay. Whose trench has been filled in, whose pillar has been uprooted, one who has no bar, a noble one whose banner is lowered, whose burden is lowered, who is unfettered. Right? So in the sutta, don't get mad at me that it says that Bhikkhu Bodhi decided to translate it as one whose shaft has been lifted, but that's the way that it says it. And how is the bhikkhu one whose shaft has been lifted? Here the bhikkhu has abandoned ignorance, has cut it off at the root, made it like a palm stump, done away with it, so that it is no longer subject to further arising. That is how the bhikkhu is one whose shaft has been lifted. And how is the bhikkhu one whose trench has been filled in? Here the bhikkhu has abandoned the round of births that brings renewed being, has cut it off at the roots, so that it is no longer subject to further arising. That is how the bhikkhu whose trench has been filled in, right? So he's no longer coming into any state of being. So essentially, with the cultivation and the fruition of right view, you see, like you've just come into experiencing things as they are, where they are in the moment, and there's nothing like you're not going anywhere. Like, does that make sense? Like, so all of your consciousness, all of your perceptions, all of your senses are arising and passing away, experienced right where they are, and you're not becoming something else in the future, right? So that the view that there's a self, with the view that there's a self comes the being reborn into something else in the future, or becoming something in the future, right? So what am I going to become when I die? What am I going to become next moment? What am I going to become tomorrow? What's to become of me? Right? So these thoughts have been cut off at the root. The thoughts of what will become of me go away, because you realize there is no me to become it. Okay. And how is the bhikkhu one whose pillar has been uprooted? Here the bhikkhu has abandoned craving, has cut it off at the roots, so that it is no longer subject to further arising. That is how the bhikkhu is one whose pillar has been uprooted. And how is the bhikkhu one who has no bar? Here the bhikkhu has abandoned the 5 lower fetters, has cut them off at the roots, so that they are no longer subject to future arising. That is how the bhikkhu is one who has no bar. And how is the bhikkhu? A noble one whose banner is lowered, whose burden is lowered, who is unfettered. Here a bhikkhu has abandoned the conceit I am, has cut it off at the root, so that it is no longer subject to future arising. That is how the bhikkhu is a noble one whose banner is lowered, whose burden is lowered. Right? So the burden of me is done, is let go of, right? All of the problem of being a person is done away with. Bhikkhus, when the gods with Indra, with Brahma, with Pajapati seek a bhikkhu who is thus liberated in mind, they do not find anything of which they could say. The consciousness of one thus gone is supported by this. Why is that? One thus gone, I say, is untraceable here and now, right? So one who's thus gone, or Tathagata, is untraceable here and now, right? So it's like the footprints of birds in the sky, right? There's no trace. Misrepresentation of the Tathagata, and this is the, oh, there's 2 more, 3. All right. Are you guys down to keep going? I think if I finish this, it's probably going to be like another like 30 minutes. I'm going to just keep going. But yeah, everyone's down. Okay, cool. I just didn't want to bore anyone here. Okay, so misrepresentation.
Just sorry, I would love to. I will look at the registration like tomorrow. Right now, I have to go. I thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Scott. You're just amazing. Okay.
Thanks for
See you,
coming,
everybody. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Bye. All right, he can watch the recording if he wants. Okay, misrepresentation of the Tathagata. So saying bhikkhus, so proclaiming, I have been baselessly, vainly, falsely, and wrongly misrepresented by some recluses and Brahmins thus. This recluse, the recluse Gautama, is one who leads astray. He teaches the annihilation, the destruction, the extermination of an existing being. As I am not, as I do not proclaim, so I have been baselessly, vainly, falsely, and wrongly misrepresented by some recluses and Brahmins thus. The recluse Gautama is one who leads astray. He teaches the annihilation, the destruction, the extermination of an existing being. Bhikkhus, both formally and now, what I teach is suffering and the cessation of suffering. If others abuse, revile, scold, and harass the Tathagata for that, the Tathagata on that account feels no annoyance, bitterness, or dejection of heart. In other words, he doesn't give a fuck, right? Doesn't give a fuck. Yeah, well, you can revile me. Yeah, I don't care. And if others honor, respect, revere, and venerate the Tathagata for that, the Tathagata on that account feels no delight, joy, or elation of heart. Still doesn't give a fuck. If others honor, respect, revere, and venerate the Tathagata for that, the Tathagata on that account thinks thus. They perform such services as these for the sake of what had earlier come to be fully understood. They perform. See, I'm going to read that again because I need to understand it. They perform such services as these for the sake of what had earlier come to be fully understood. So like the Buddhas, they're praising what has been fully understood before. So he's not taking ownership. He's not taking ownership of the praise, right? Because it's just what had come to be fully understood before, right? That's not me. That's still not him, right? So that's genius. Most people would be like, yeah, I did it. I'm going to start a cult. I'm going to have sex with my students and stuff like that. I'm not against sex, but, probably not a good thing to be doing with your spiritual students. Therefore, bhikkhus, if others abuse, revile, scold, and harass you, on that account you should not entertain any annoyance, bitterness, or dejection of heart. All right, so this is direct applicable instruction. So people out in the world talk shit about you, Isaiah. On that account, you should feel no annoyance, bitterness, or dejection of heart, right? Don't jump in front of that arrow and say this is me and get hit by it, right? Same with it. Whatever your coworkers or whatever it is, people at school, friends, don't take ownership of that dukkha. Let them keep it, right? Don't let them give it to you. And if others honor, respect, revere, and venerate you, on that account you should not entertain any delight, joy, or elation of heart. If others honor, respect, and venerate you, on that account you should think thus: they perform such services as these for the sake of what had earlier come to be fully understood. Not yours. Therefore, bhikkhus, whatever is not yours, abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. What is not yours? Material form is not yours. Abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. Feeling is not yours. Abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. Perception is not yours. Abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. Formations are not yours. Abandon it. Etc. Consciousness is not yours. Abandon it. Bhikkhus, what do you think? If people carried off the grass, sticks, branches, and leaves in this Jeta grove, or burned them, or did what they liked with them, would you think people are carrying us off or burning us or doing what they like with us? No, Venerable Sir. Why not? Because this is neither ourself nor what belongs to self. So if people like take these profound teachings and they misuse them, or they shit on them, or they don't comprehend them, right? If you're talking to your mom, right, and she doesn't get the profundity of it and she poo-poos it, you also don't get butthurt by that, because that doesn't belong to you, right? It's just a raft. See, this is where it gets tricky, right? This is where it can get very subtle and tricky. So this is why this is a very good sutta to understand thoroughly, because these problems will come up time and time again. So too, bhikkhus, whatever is not yours, abandon it. When you have abandoned it, that will lead to your welfare and happiness for a long time. What is it that is not yours? All of the things that were mentioned earlier. Okay, this is the last one, the last paragraph. In this Dhamma, bhikkhus, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, open, evident, and free of patchwork. Right, so there's nothing missing in the Dhamma. There's no like There's no like plot holes, right? I think like you can find other teachings that have like that aren't like foolproof, like whole and total, right? Because they make claims that are unfounded. The only thing that the Dhamma teaches is, again, dukkha, dukkha nirodha, and that's an experiential here and now thing. Whereas it's not saying, oh, consciousness is the universal self and it's eternal and blah, 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 and we're all just dreams in the mind of the god Vishnu or like something like that. That's not like foolproof. Like that's kind of like an unfounded claim. It cannot be verified here and now, right? It's not scientific. So the Buddha Dhamma is well proclaimed, clear, open, evident, and free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, open, evident, and free of patchwork, there is no future round for manifestation in the case of those bhikkhus who are arhats, with taints destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached the true goal, destroyed the fetters of being, and are completely liberated through final knowledge. Bhikkhus, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, free of patchwork, those bhikkhus who have abandoned the 5 lower fetters are all due to reappear spontaneously in the pure abodes, and there attain final nibbana without ever returning from that world. Bhikkhus, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, free of patchwork, those bhikkhus who have abandoned the 3 lower fetters and attenuated lust, hate, and delusion are all once returners, returning once to this world to make an end of suffering. Bhikkhus, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, free of patchwork, who have abandoned 3 fetters are stream enterers, no longer subject to perdition, bound for deliverance and headed for enlightenment. Bhikkhus, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, free of patchwork, those bhikkhus who are Dhamma followers or faith followers are all headed for enlightenment. Bhikkhus, the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus is clear, open, evident, and free of patchwork. In the Dhamma well proclaimed by me thus, which is clear, open, evident, and free of patchwork, those bhikkhus who have sufficient faith in me, sufficient love for me, are all headed for heaven. That is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. All right. So that's the end of the sutta. Is there any questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah. So like the whole thing is to just keep coming back to the impermanence of things, the unsatisfactoriness of that impermanence, and because of those things, then the realization kind of not so comes. And
Don't keep coming back to the concept of impermanence and trying to see impermanence in your experience. That's kind of artificial. So the point is to keep looking. So keep coming back to right view is what you should be coming back to. So looking at a thought as a thought, looking as a feeling as a feeling. So you're not like coming back to the concept of impermanence and trying to overlay it onto your experience, but instead you are just simply looking just to see how it is, right?
Yeah.
And then you see, oh, this is a kind of a shitty thought that's creating dukkha, but let me change it, right? So get the mind purified, get the mind into a wholesome state, And then what do you do then? Keep looking still.
All right.
All right, cool. Good question. Good question. All right. So, oh, DJ, were you about to say something?
Yeah, you know what? Let's go for it. Yeah, no, thinking about or seeing, the thoughts as just thoughts, and not taking them personally,
Yeah.
though, is quite helpful in terms of dividing the thoughts up and not being like into the unwholesome and or wholesome, because it's not like, oh, we have to defend this thought that arose because it's my thought and I'm gonna hurt its feelings and all. You can take this sort of beautiful, just detached perspective of just seeing the thoughts as thoughts. And it's kind of clinical in a way, but it's just like, wait, this is a wholesome thought, this is an unwholesome thought, but we don't need to lay claim to it. It's just like a clear looking at the process rather than like caught up in like the emotional attachment with it. Because
Yeah, it's very clinical. That's a good word for it. It's a clinical operation. And even the emotions that arise or the feeling that arise dependent on it are also, oh, this is a feeling. And what type of feeling is it? It's either a pleasant or unpleasant feeling. Still not mine, right?
Yeah.
So you keep looking at your experience this way. And then, yeah, you can, instead of creating unwholesome thoughts because of the unwholesome thoughts, like, oh, shit, I have an unwholesome thought. You just see it for what it is, and you can take the right effort in that scenario. I think that's a good note to end it on. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Anna, thank you for being there. If you have any last words, now's your chance. Isaiah, you got any parting
Thank
words?
you.
Yeah, thanks
Just
for
thank
coming.
you, man. This is always good. Hell
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really a joy to have you on, Isaiah, and you create a lot of good dialogue. So it's always a treat to have you here.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. Metta all around, and see you later. Bye bye.
Bye.